Okay, let's continue on this series that we are covering currently. So far we have established you have three types. You have an all or nothing, you have overgeneralization, you have mental filters, and jumping into conclusions. The fifth type of cognitive distortion is what you call magnification. And this is where you exaggerate the importance of your problems or shortcomings, or you minimize the importance of your desirable qualities. This is also called binocular vision trick. You're minimizing the importance of things that you are naturally good at, and you exaggerate the importance of your problems. And it is a mode of pessimistic thinking. It is the level of pessimism in this case is very high. Now, the sixth one is what you call emotional reasoning. And emotional reasoning is where you assume that your emotions carry some truth in them, that all you have to do to be right is you have to feel the emotion. While this may be true, most cases it is not. And most emotions carry with them all those what you call a wavy sort of behavior, where today you're up, tomorrow you're down, today you're up, tomorrow you're down. One time you have anxiety, sometimes you do not have, and so forth and so forth and so forth. Therefore, feeling an emotion does not credit you reacting to that emotion as though it were an actual fact. And this is where, for example, when people are being treated for generalized anxiety disorder, this is where they feel that they are going to go through a very bad event, and they assume it is true, and they are reacting to it as though it were true. Funny example, I tell my parent, I was in campus then, I think first year, second year, that I'm going on a trip, and this will be in Nakuru. And by those days we didn't have cell phones for campus. Sorry, it was just hard time. We didn't have them then. So I just told him I'll be in Kabarak University between this and this time, and in case it takes longer, I'll find a way to communicate. We used to have these things called simu ya jamii. You just go somewhere where they're stationed, you pay 20 bob, call home, and stuff like that. But I failed. The day extended. The trip or the training extended by 2 days. I had not anticipated, and I forgot to mention to my parent that actually I may be staying over for 2 more days. And this is when everything took an emotional turn. My own parents assumed I had been kidnapped, I had been killed, I had been brutalized. All the horrible things that they were saying on TV, they were assuming that was me. And so they went ahead and called the police, and the police were busy trying to track me down. It is not until I made the call much later that they did realize that they had overreacted to the whole situation. But why did they get to that point? They got to that point because, number one, they assumed their emotions were facts, which is not always the case. So once you feel something, always assess it in terms of the facts on the ground. Is it true or is it false? Now you go to the seventh one. These are what you call the should statements. The shoulds. And this is where we believe certain things should happen. These are should statements that we have. I shouldn't be treated this way, and therefore we react. I should be treated this way. Therefore we say this is good treatment, this is bad treatment, this is good treatment, this is bad treatment. Now, the problem with should statement is that they actually set you up to fail because it is a perfectionist way of thinking. And it is not a must that things should be the way you think they should. Now, most people try to motivate themselves with should and should it, but that doesn't always work. Therefore, you shouldn't approach life or events that are happening to you with a should mentality. A person should respect me. My parents should love me. My spouse should be faithful to me. All those things that we think people should, they always fail and come short. This is not to mean that you be mistreated, as it were. No, this is basically trying to say most of the shoulds that we have people rarely match up to them. If you look at your own life, the people that are close to you, most of the things that they expect you to do, you do not do. Therefore, it's a perfectionist way of thinking about it. And Dr. Albert Ellis actually called it a very vulgar word, but I like the way it was coined. He says this is a form of masturbation. Please don't judge me for this. And this is where we say people must, or situations must, or things must go in a certain way, and it's a shouldy approach to life. It doesn't work that way. Now you go to the eighth cognitive distortion, and this is called labeling, and it is an extreme form of cognitive distortion, and in some cases it has been one of the antecedents to mental health issues such as depression. And what is labeling? Labeling is an extreme form of all or nothing thinking. Instead of saying I was wrong at that point, you attach a negative label. I am like this, and so forth. Now, this is you doing it to yourself. That's one. Also, there are situations where you're labeled by other people, and you take those labels as who you are, and they're negative labels. And this is where people will say, I am a loser, I'll never do this, I'm a failure, I'm a fool, I'm a jerk, I'm a creep, I'm this, just because at some point you did something that was wrong, and at that particular moment it seemed to be right, but you assumed that because a person called you a fool, because a person called you a loser, a person called you even a simp, for the love of God or modernity, that is who you are. It's basically just a one-time off thing. It was an event that happened in a certain way, but that is not the summary of who you are. You cannot use that event to overgeneralize and say this is who a person is. If at one point you behaved in a jerky kind of way and a person called you a jerk, that's a label, and it's a bad label, but you shouldn't stick to it because it is not a summary of who you are. Now, most times when a person is called you're a thief, you're a scammer, you're this, you're that, they stick to it because they assume since I've been labeled and people will know me this way, I'll stick to it all the way to the end. Now, this labeling might be creating what you call hostility against yourself and even hostility towards other people because they have labeled you that way, and it's you against the system to prove them wrong, and so forth and so forth. You just take it as it is, and you realize that you've been labeled based on a very small portion of information, and it doesn't summarize who you really are as a person. But labeling, again, is something that can lead to a cognitive distortion and poor decision making. Now, you go to the ninth one, and this is what you call personalizing. And in personalizing, this is where something occurs and you hold yourself responsible. Let's even assume that in the unfortunate event, somebody went through an accident because you didn't do something. Now, a person who suffers from personalization will take it to heart and say, it's my fault such and such a thing happened. It's my fault such and such a thing happened. Instead of trying to pinpoint the cause of the problem, they decide to blame themselves. There are some people who would blame themselves even in the most weirdest of ways. For example, let us assume that you're a girl and you're in campus and your boyfriend beats you up. It's a case of domestic violence. Now again, you remember the issue of cognitive dissonance over here. You're trying to reduce the dissonance and you say, it is my fault that this happened because I call him an SOB, because I call him this, because I call him that, because I took his phone, because I did this and did that. What you're basically doing is taking a negative event that happened to you as a person and you're personalizing it and excusing that information using other reasons, as it were. Now, let us assume another thing of how people take these things personally by blaming themselves. Same girl is in campus, discovered boyfriend is cheating on her, And she says, again, because there is this cognitive dissonance over here, she says the reason why he is cheating on me is because I am not good in bed. Now, this just feels off. This is a campus class. We're talking about good in bed, but it's the best example I can come up with. Forgive me for the lack of a better example. Now, that is an example again of personalizing and blaming oneself for something that you are actually not responsible for. You are not responsible for a person's lack of self-regulation by them hitting you. You are not responsible for a person's infidelities. Those are their choices and they have nothing to do with you. You shouldn't be personalizing, but you will find most people will be personalizing and then labeling themselves and then overgeneralizing situations. All this become a messy web of magnification here, emotional reasoning there, shoulds here, shoulds there, and so forth and so forth, and it creates one holistic thing that a person is using to make their decisions. In retrospect, when they're making those decisions, they're making poor decisions because they are personalizing or they are blaming themselves for things that they shouldn't do. Now, we go to the summary of it all. And this is a key takeaway, that all of us as human beings, again, just like biases, are subject. We are all subject to all these cognitive distortions. Nobody will say I am immune to them. But the degree to which we are affected by each of them will differ from one person to the other. When you're given certain events or you go through certain events and you use either of these cognitive distortions in combination with each other and so forth, you can bet with a high degree of certainty that the decision is actually a wrong decision. I'll repeat. Now, if you have or you're affected by these cognitive distortions in one combination or the other, and you are using this to model your decisions, to model after your decisions, then you can bet that the decision that you're making at the end is also wrong, regardless of how good it feels, regardless of how peaceful it feels, regardless of how comforting it feels. It's still a wrong decision because it is an overgeneralization on one hand, personalization on the other, magnification on the other, jumping to conclusion on the other. So you need to ask yourself, am I making this decision based on a cognitive distortion? Have I taken certain information and I've generalized it? Have I distorted reality in a way? Or have I deleted some information to deal with the cognitive dissonance that I am going through? So that's it for this series of cognitive distortion. So we go to the other videos. Thank you.